Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to talk about what we saw in SEC basketball Wednesday night. Blake, I think the most anticipated game was LSU at Kentucky, which LSU led for a good while. Kentucky missing both point guards, which we said could be a factor. LSU is not the team you want to play when you're down your point guards, but Kentucky made it work again. And we have talked so many times about Kentucky finding that different guy on every night, and I don't think we have talked 5 seconds about Bryson Hopkins all year, but he was that guy for Kentucky.
I mean, like I said, is rarely do we have a midweek that goes according to plan with all 7 games, but you had a lot of that during the middle of these weeks. Now we'll talk about our Saturday games in our next video, and that's going to be a challenge.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Think about this. All we've talked about is if Kentucky's going to find ways to win without their 2 guards, they have enough talent to do so because they have so many guys that can step up. Hopkins steps up big last night, 13 points, plays 16 minutes. Not a lot of minutes, but without him, they probably don't win the game just because, otherwise you have 4 other guys that are playing 38 plus minutes. And so you got to have somebody that can sub in and give you some minutes, and that's what happened last night. And on the flip side of that, we said this was going to be a much tougher matchup for Kentucky than Alabama just because of the way LSU plays defense. And I think you saw some of that here. Kentucky didn't turn it over probably as much as I would have anticipated. I mean, they had 12 turnovers. That's not a ton. When you kind of think about how the game played out, I think a lot of that was towards the end, right? Where Kentucky, LSU kind of made a run there towards the end. And but we also said the issue for LSU could be offense, and they just I don't think they didn't shoot it well enough at times. You allow Kentucky to make the run. The first half of this game is completely the way LSU wants it. It's their type of style. But as we say, it is just when Kentucky gets rolling, especially in Rupp, they're not going to be easy to stop, and I don't know if anyone can stop them when they're playing in that building the way that they've been playing and they're making shots. So yeah, this was a game that I thought really played out as expected. Not surprised at all that LSU controlled that game early just based on how they play defense. But eventually, as we've seen, LSU can kind of hit a lull offensively, especially when you're going up against a good defensive team like Kentucky. Xavier Pinson, for anyone who thought that we were overvaluing his production when he wasn't on the floor,
yeah,
last night is a great example of that because this team is just very inconsistent offensively. But when you have someone like him, obviously, that's his best game of the season to this point, but we know he has that potential because he showed it at Missouri too. And I think you got to have him on the floor, for them to have a chance to make a run. I know LSU 7-8, 19-9. That's not going to wow anyone, but I still think this is a really good LSU team, and I think they're one that when we come to getting the NCAA tournament bracket, I think they're going to be one of those teams that you're probably going to look at, barring just a completely awful matchup. You're going to say, man, that team may be wherever they are seeded-wise, but they feel a couple spots better than that at full strength. And that's the problem. They haven't been full strength all year, but Kentucky isn't full strength either right now, and they are still winning. And that is the most impressive part, that they just keep finding ways. So,
yeah, if I tell you going in that Washington and Wheeler don't play, that they go 2 of 12 from 3, that they have 3 assists to 12 turnovers, what are you putting the odds on Kentucky winning that game?
Yeah, and that's why we said going in. I don't even remember what the line was or what the expected differential was in this
9.
game. I think I don't remember exactly what I said, but I was like, man, this is a tricky game for Kentucky because, again, I just felt there was such a big difference between LSU and Alabama in terms of style of play and defensive play. And I mean, look, Kentucky's got 16 points left, or 16 points with 6 minutes left in the first half, something like that. And it was the type of game that LSU wanted, but it's the same story with Kentucky. When they get going, it's just there's no way to stop them. And I got to keep going back to, I mean, Kellen Grady plays all 40 minutes. Oscar Tshiebwe, think about this. Like,
he drew 10 fouls last night.
Well, here's my thing. Look at how many minutes he's playing. Like, this is a guy, for what he does, I mean, really, let's be completely honest about this. Like, he is like a machine, and the way he has to play, he's still able to be out there for 38 minutes. He played 38 minutes last night, 35 against Alabama, 38 against Florida. I mean, he is something, man. And I just think that to me is a very impressive, kind of underrated thing when you have a guy like that. I mean, and that's not to take away from Kellen Grady, who plays every minute, or Toppin, who plays 39, or Mintz, who plays 38. But Sheboy, with the how he has to play in the position he plays in, to play 38 minutes. Like, it's just, and he's done it before the season, but I think in these SEC games, we know they are physical. It can be, it can be very taxing, especially against a team like LSU. And so, I mean, it's just, yeah, I thought this was a really good game. LSU tried to make it interesting there down the stretch, but once things swung in Kentucky's favor, Kentucky's a team that I think is very hard to come back against. Like, they're the kind of team that I just think you have to know they're gonna get one of those runs going at some point, and when they do in Lexington, they're gonna be hard to stop. And still, the way they're doing it without their starting backcourt is very impressive. And we'll talk about whether they could have those guys back on Saturday, but it's a big win for Kentucky because winning both these games, I said going in, these are tricky. If you expect, well, we only expected Washington, but now that we've known Wheeler's in there too, these were tricky games for them, but they win them both.
Yeah, a couple things. Let's start with Kentucky as we wrap this one up. Chemistry's a big deal. And Bryce Hopkins last night played, what was it, 15 and a half minutes, 13 points, plus 16. But the thing that stood out to me, did you see how happy his teammates were for him every time he scored a basket? I think that one thing that helps you in that spot is having good chemistry. It's hard to get kids to buy in when you're all, I think he was player of the year in Chicago.
I've always said that John Calipari does not.
Yeah.
I know they can be looked at as the Yankees or whatever you want to view them as. The one thing he has never gotten enough credit for is
all these guys were studs in high school.
Anyone who thinks this is just as easy as getting the top players and putting them out there together and you're just going to automatically win 30 games are kidding themselves. It's not that easy. Like, it's really not. And I think now more so in this SEC, a decade ago, sure, maybe you could have said, you know what, even if his teams don't play to their potential, they're still going to win 30 games just because the league wasn't as good. But nowadays, to be in that position to where you have to convince all these guys, and what have I said all year? The reason why Kentucky's as good as they are this year is because they've understood their roles. They're not five guys on the floor going out trying to score 25 every game. Kellen Grady understands what his role is. He doesn't have to score 25 every game like maybe he would have had to do at Davidson. Severe Wheeler doesn't have to do all the things he had to do at Georgia. Go up and down the line. It's just that's why Kentucky's as good as they are. And like you said, that's where you bring in someone like Hopkins, and it's just it all mixes together. And this is why this team has the chemistry and all that, all the tools you need to win a national championship.
On the LSU side, I think Jimmy Dykes last night called out Tari Eason a little bit for not playing well. I think he ran into some early foul trouble, did not respond very well to the challenge of Oscar Tshiebwe. Eason, when he's on the floor, is a top 5 player in this league, which is saying a lot this year. Now, being on the floor has been a little bit of an issue. Last night he plays 13 minutes for them. Fouls out, the stat line not good. But you mentioned Pinson. I think the big thing is he looks like he's about 100% now. He doesn't have that knee brace. I just really wondered a few weeks ago when you saw him playing on that, it wasn't the same guy. Could he get back? So I think if you're LSU, even though it was ugly at times, you didn't score as much, just seeing him out there and healthy, you mentioned how much he means. I don't think you feel a lot worse about your team leaving this one because Eason plays his worst game of the year, but you're getting your point guard back and healthy and playing at a level that maybe we haven't seen all year.
I was going to say about Eason. I mean, I get it, but still, this guy's been pretty fantastic.
He's been a
most
stud.
Of the year.
Yeah.
I think to knock him over just last night, I mean, that's one of the worst games. Again, like you said, maybe one of his worst games. I mean, I think the Florida game is probably a better example of that, where he, played 8 or 9 minutes and fouled out. And they still won. That's the crazy thing. So, yeah, I mean, come on. Like, I think you're going to have, like we said, Kentucky's a bad matchup for anyone. And I just think that you're going to have those kind of games, especially when you're going up against a team like this. And remember who your opposition is and who you're trying to match up against. I mean, you're talking about one of the best players, not just in the league, if not the best player in the league, and one of the best players in the country. It's just there's so many different things like that. So I don't really put a whole lot of stock into just one bad game for Easton. Yes, if he has his normal output, LSU wins, but we could play that game a lot of times. But Benson, he's still the big deal to me. Like he's the one that just gives them another level offensively. We know Darius Days has the capability of kind of breaking out for big offensive games, but I still think a lot of things are going to rely on Pinson just because he is kind of the guy that needs the ball in his hands more than anyone else. And if that's the case, they're at least going to be in a position to have some success, more success offensively. I just think everyone else is way too hit and miss on that. So, yeah, I don't really come out of this with any changed thoughts on LSU. My thoughts kind of stayed the same. I know I kind of jumped off the bandwagon after the Vanderbilt game, but now that they have gotten Pinson back, I know they lost at South Carolina, but we'll talk about them in a second. I still think this is a team that has a wide variety of outcomes in the tournament, but they're still good enough to win multiple games. And I think at least knowing that, that possibility is there for a team like LSU.
LSU's back in the trust tree?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, again, I know they lost to South Carolina, like I said, but they played well here. And I know Kentucky's shorthanded, but I still think the LSU is just the kind of team, and I guess the issue we could have with them is they haven't really beaten a good team in a while. But I think I feel like they still, and I don't, they don't have a lot of time to do this, but they still need a little time. I think to sort of get everyone. I mean, they've only played 5 games with Pinson back in the mix now, so I just think that it comes with time, and I still think they're one we have to remember at full strength what they were. They were 15-1 at full strength, and that just kind of derailed things after that. And
Yeah.
it's been a little difficult to get it back to that point. I don't think they will get it back to that point necessarily, but they still have the potential. And I think that's one where even if their offense holds them back a little bit, they're still really good defensively, and I would not count them out against a lot of teams just because of that.
We warned people that Ole Miss could make it a little more interesting against Auburn than most thought because Ole Miss has just done that under Kermit Davis, has played Auburn closer than you would think it would. But I think the injury to Matt Morrell last night in the first half, he went down after taking, an elbow or a forearm. It wasn't a dirty play, but it happened, knocked him out of the game. I think with Ruffin already out, that just was going to be too much for them to bite off in Auburn's building. I don't know what else you can say about Walker Kessler. Frankly, he logs a few more minutes, and he has probably would that have been his third triple-double of the year?
Take your pick.
Yeah.
I mean, he's had a few, yeah.
And he plays 28 minutes and almost does it again.
The story for Ole Miss is the same story it's been all year. I mean, I've said it, it's the lost season. Just, man, I don't even – it's hard to coach that. I mean, right, what do you even – I mean, I feel for Kermit Davis, man. It's just like we didn't have them placed as a high finish team or anything, but still, I mean, it's just you don't know what you're going to get night in, night out because you just have all these injuries and everything that's kind of played out the way it has. And I'm sure it's frustrating because, again, they are a team that's played Auburn well in recent years. And we said even going back to that first meeting, they were up double digits or whatever it was. And but, yeah, this played out kind of what you thought. I did think there would, Auburn may struggle a little bit just because of Kermit's defense and those kind of things. I mean, he usually does a pretty good job scheming up things like that and understanding, as we said, it's one thing to try to scheme up against maybe the past couple Auburn teams, I guess, but one with 6-10 and 7-1 is a little harder to maybe devise a plan that's going to just be completely effective when you got Smith and Kessler doing what they're doing. But I mean, let's be honest too, Zep Jasper was the big difference in this game to me. I mean, he if he's hitting shots like that, that's exactly what Auburn needs because I remember, I mean, we've talked about it. It's just they are not the shooting team that they have been in recent years. And if they can get someone like him knocking down shots from outside, that's going to be significant because Green's going to hit some. You kind of know what to expect from them from three by now, but I still think that's going to be an important factor for them because they're going to have to hit some outside shots because every team they play, as we said, once you get to the NCAA tournament, whether they're a 1 seed, 2 seed, whatever, what the 15 or 16 is going to do. They can't play you man to man. Like it's not possible. They're not going to have anyone that can sort of match up with these other two guys. And so you're going to start to see some of those different type of zone looks and such. And I think that's something that for Auburn, is going to be important because you're going to have to hit some shots from outside and teams are going to force you to go in that direction and say, can you make the shots from outside? And if you got someone like Jasper stepping up and hitting shots, that's what they need, and they need to be able to get some of that from these guards. We know the bigger guys too can step out and make shots, but they need their guards to be able to hit something. They don't have to necessarily hit 15 a game or anything, but they got to get some production from there because I think that's what teams are going to force them to do. Even if teams do try to do that, they're still going to be able to get the ball to Smith and Kessler. It's just, as we said, they're a matchup nightmare, and we saw that again in this game. But yeah, nice home win for Auburn. I think it's one that, different scenarios could play out, but based on what Ole Miss, but injuries have once again been the story for them.
Auburn is at the point of the season where it's been so good that everyone just picks that team apart, and that's what comes with the territory of being an elite team. So I know Auburn fans, you probably get annoyed at it sometimes, but I'd say be thankful for it. And I think the broadcasters talked about that a little bit last night. And you remember what I said maybe a month or more ago. What I was shocked with Auburn is how that it found that gear to where it looked like it was playing at a March level back in February. And it's hard to get there, right? But the one thing that I'm not going to say I'm concerned about this, because I think at this point he's a luxury more than anything. But Alan Flanigan against A&M, he gets 16 points 2 weeks ago. Then he's gone 2-2-3 the last 3 games. Plays 22 minutes last night. Is it going to happen for him this year? Because, again, at the end of last year, he was their best player. And, boy, if they get him playing at the level that he can play at, that takes that team to another gear. But I just wonder if it's going to happen, if he's 100% or what you think that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea on the injury stuff. I mean, you never know when a guy comes back from an injury like that. And you also don't know how just missing as many games as he did impacts chemistry and those kind of things. I think that plays into it. But what I do know is this. There's 2 things. He's still playing a lot of minutes. And he's not in the role he was in last year. It's completely different now. Because last year's team, if he doesn't do what he did last year, like, I don't know what they do, right? Because the whole Sharif Cooper thing where he's playing some, not much, and it kind of becomes the Alan Flanigan show last year where he has to step up and basically be the guy every single game or else they are in trouble. He doesn't have to do that this year. And so I don't even think it's really necessarily a matter of, I mean, look, I know he's probably had some games he'd love to have back in terms of production, but I don't think it's like we should just look at Alan Flanigan's numbers and say, well, he's not doing as much as he did last year. I think that's expected because they didn't have Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler last year. And I think that it just kind of comes with the territory. His role is not as big and it doesn't have to be as big. And I think that's a good thing because if he had to play the role he had to play last year where he's having to shoot whatever, double digits every single game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that puts a lot of pressure on a guy, as we talked about with all these guys around the league. It's just that can be very difficult. And so I think it's almost one of those scenarios where I don't want to say it's like you're not happy when he plays bad. I don't even know if bad's the right word, but like he's kind of that deceptive one where maybe people are just kind of saying, all right, well, we just worry about Smith and Kessler and we'll be fine. But you're like, wait a second, like there is this Alan Flanigan guy who proved last year he can be a consistent scorer. And I think he's the kind of guy that could be, again, whatever your definition of X factor is, because if everyone decides just to forget about Alan Flanigan, he still has the potential to go off at any time. So I think I don't put a lot into it right now. Yes, I mean, the last 3 games, he's only scored 2, 2, and 3. Yeah, if that becomes the trend the rest of the way, then maybe you start to say, all right, well, they got to get a little bit more out of him. And yes, they do probably need a little bit more out of him scoring wise, but I still think I think they're fine. And I think it's because he has proven he can do it before. I just don't. He's just not in the same role he was in before, and I don't really think there's anything beyond that I would read into it because Bruce is still playing him, and he has to play him because he is still one of their better players on the team. He's still going to get those minutes. It's just I think the role has just changed, and like you said, I don't. None of us know exactly coming back from an injury like that. You never know, and I think that's hard to kind of speculate on. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a totally different role. It's like going from Friday night starter in the SEC to, you know, seventh inning setup duties in baseball terms. I mean, it's just completely different. And you wonder, that may be tough to adjust to. That's not a knock on him, but that's a good point. We talked about Vandy lately as the team that maybe nobody wants to play out of the bottom half of the league, although this team is not in the bottom half of the league now in the standings. South Carolina to me now is that team, Blake. I know Mississippi State is awful on the road, was awful on the road at shooting threes last night, but Jermaine Couisnard follows up 33 points with 22. Keyshawn Bryant has a good game, he's been a little hit and miss, but there's been more of that lately. James Reese has kind of been there for them all year. You get that little smirk. You're not buying this, are you?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
What I'm looking at is I'm looking at the SEC standings right now, and what I'm telling you is we got a game to pick on Saturday that's going to determine the 5th place in the SEC.
Isn't that crazy?
And it's between South Carolina and Alabama. So, yeah, no, I'm not saying that at all. I mean, this team's won 4 in a row now, and I mean, it's like, what have I said? Like, this is just. I think I probably said this back in January at some point. I said, just wait. South Carolina's going to do what they do. They're not going to be in the NCAA tournament, but they're going to probably finish 5th or 4th in the league. They have a good chance to finish 5th of the league now. I mean, it is crazy to think about, but that's where they are. And Bryant and Couisnard, to me, have always been the guys. Like, they have been the guys that if they play well, South Carolina's got a shot to be good and perhaps really good at times. On the flip side, I don't even know what Mississippi State fans think right now. I'm very curious, and I know what they think, but I just don't even know what your thoughts are on this team moving forward anymore because it's got to be disappointing. I don't want to say they're exactly like Florida, but they feel like they've been in the Florida category of teams over the past several years that just should have reached a higher level than they did. And this is going to be the same scenario, I think, against Mississippi State. At this point, I think they could win out, and they're still not going to make the tournament. I mean in the regular season. It's still going to take quite a bit of work now in the SEC tournament, maybe even making a run to the championship game, which none of us are going to predict that at this point. 0 of 14 from 3. I mean, it's just, oh my goodness. Yeah. So South Carolina still wins this game. I don't want to say handily, but kind of was handily, wasn't it? They were up 19 with 6 minutes left, and they turned it over 18 times, and they still win this game.
12 points at half.
So, I mean, it's just like I don't even know what else to say about Mississippi State. I think that the conversation should be more about South Carolina. And yes, they are in a good spot now. They get this opportunity against Alabama. They still got to go to Alabama and Auburn. Those are going to be tough games. But as I told someone the other day, South Carolina's another one. Like Frank Martin, I think if you're anyone that's trying to find ways to beat a Bruce Pearl team, maybe Frank Martin and this team has at least the physicality they play with on defense. Maybe that's something they could make it more interesting than maybe people think. But yeah, quite a setup here for South Carolina. Don't think they're in the NCAA tournament conversation. I think they need to win out still to do that. But yeah, we'll see.
Over under on the number of coaching changes in the offseason in the SEC.
Someone said it yesterday for me and said 4.5. I said I said under, but I would probably maybe change that to over. I think you're going to have another one somewhere that you're not expecting.
Well, and that's the other thing is like if Nate Oates leaves for Kansas or something, as some have speculated, there might be a domino effect with Self going to the league. Frank Martin, although Carolina's finishing well, that was tense a year ago. I mean, I think the four.
Right to me,
yeah, I mean, the four that I think were Georgia, I think we we almost know is happening. Missouri, I think, is happening. I would bet. And then you got Mississippi State, which, barring Howland winning the SEC tournament, I just don't see that. And given the way they play outside their building, I don't see that. And then Florida, I mean, if Mike White doesn't go to the tournament, which I don't know, I think I would bet not at this point. And again, I mean, that's 4 that come to mind, and then whatever else happens elsewhere. So
I'll save all my tidbits and nuggets on the coaching carousel for another video. Teaser. Look at that. Teaser. This is how you do it in this business. Got to be a pro. You got to tease stuff. I'll save that for another video.
Okay. Well, we've got to do predictions in a minute too. So
yeah, that's why I want to save that, because we still got to do our predictions, and we got probably the biggest Saturday of the league thus far. So
all right, we'll have those up shortly. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. That helps us out. And we'll have our predictions video up not long after this one gets published. So be sure to watch for that.